Hello, and welcome to the Murder She Wrote Rewatch podcast. That's right, we're back again with the next episode. We're off to kill the wizard. It is an interesting little episode, and as I have been doing lately, and it's been working out quite well, we're going to go through all of the players, our suspects and whatnot, and famous people that are involved in this particular episode of the Murder She Wrote Rewatch podcast. Before we delve into the story itself, but just a little brief synopsis of the story, just to give you an idea of what we're up against. We have our murder victim, the horrible Horatio Baldwin, who is played by none other than rather famous actor James Coco. Now, James Coco passed away back in 1987 at the age of 56, according to his. He was he's been in a lot of stuff, a couple things that I've seen, in fact. The Muppets Take Manhattan. He played Mr. Skeffington in that one. He was also in Murder by Death. He played Milo Perrier, the detective in that particular comedy that was supposed to be Hercule Poirot, the Belgian in there. He was also in Only When I Laugh and Man of La Mancha. I haven't seen those two. But he's been in quite a few things. He was in a couple episodes of Who's the Boss as Nick Milano. Interesting. I did not know that. What else has he been in here? Twilight Zone, Ray Bradbury Theater, Love Boat. Seems like everybody's been in the Love Boat. Pardon me. He was only in that episode of Murder, She Wrote. Oh, that's cool. He was also in Johnny Dangerously as Maroney's bouncer, uncredited. Very interesting. Fantasy Island, yeah, he was in that one too. What else has he been in? Joe Dumpling in The Dumplings TV series. I don't know that one. Colucci's Department TV series. He was Joe Colucci for a few episodes. So yeah, he's been in a few things. Rather famous actor back in the day. Very, very much a character actor in what he played and whatnot. So yeah, very cool. Very cool to see him. I recognized him right off when he showed up in this particular episode. There is also Christine. Christine Belfort, the actress playing Erica Baldwin, Horatio's wife. She was only in the one scene, and as far as I know, she's still alive. Last movie she was in 2007, Ruffian. Don't know it. Oh, she was in 9 episodes of Beverly Hills 90210 over the span of 7 years? Wow. What else? Murder, She Wrote. Oh, she's been in a few episodes in this. She was Erica Baldwin in this one. 2 years later, in 1986, she was in another episode. Then 3 years after that, she was in an episode in 1989. And then 4 years after that, she was in an episode in 1993. All as different characters. Because it's been a number of years. We didn't have DVDs back then. So you just ended up forgetting actresses and actors, unless they were super famous. Oh, wow. She was in Freddy's Nightmares as Dr. Weiss, 1989. That's cool. That's the Nightmare on Elm Street television series that was in. That's pretty cool. She was in the Outlaws TV series. Silver Spoons TV series is Evelyn Stratton, if anybody has seen that. And an episode of Golden Girls and Family Ties and Who's the Boss and Murphy's Law. I think Murphy's Law is who I think it is, isn't it? Nope, it's not. I was thinking of something else. Oh yeah, Heart to Heart, The Greatest American Hero, Dynasty. Yeah, she's been in a lot of The Incredible Hulk, Magnum P.I. Adelaide Malone. Adelaide Malone. Oh, I remember this episode. Yeah. Not that I remember seeing it, although I probably did. Magnum PI, yeah. On the Magnum PI, the Magnum Rewatch podcast that Graham Stark and Kathleen DeVere does on Lodi Reading Run. They did this episode, Adelaide. They didn't like it that much, but she was Adelaide. So yeah, this is that actress. Okay, that's cool. I like that. I can dig that jive. Let's see. She was only in the one scene. Let's see. We have George DiCenzo playing Michael Gardner, who is Horatio Baldwin's right-hand man. Pardon me. He passed away in 2010. Dear God. But apparently he... that's a little weird. Is that who I think it is? The Exorcist 3. William Peter Blatty's director's cut of The Exorcist 3, thought to be lost, recovered and released under its original title. The definitive cut based on his novel Legion. Oh, okay. The Exorcist 3 Legion. Alright, that's why he's in it. I was wondering, because he has a credit for Legion in 2016, and that's like 6 years after he passed away. But apparently they recovered it. He's apparently known for the original Dark Shadows. He was in that. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. She-Ra, Princess of Power. He did a voice in that. And he was Sam Baines in Back to the Future. Very interesting. What else has he done recently? Old Man Kelly. He did the voice of Old Man Kelly in Grand Theft Auto Vice City, the video game. If any of you guys know that, so I hear it's a popular game. Maybe some people know this. Law and Order. He was a couple episodes in that. Different people. NYPD Blue. Murder, She Wrote. Oh God, he's been in a few. He was in We're Off to Kill the Wizard. He was in an episode in 1986, one in 1988, one in 1990, one in 1992, one in 1994. The names of some of these. The Perfect Foil, Harbinger of Death, The Sicilian Encounter, Murder in Milan, Murder of the Month Club. Murder of the Month Club, that's awesome. And he is playing different characters in every one of them. Apparently the next episode he's in, the 1986, The Perfect Foil, he plays a character called Johnny Blaze. Not Ghost Rider. At least I don't think so. He plays like a cop in 3 of these episodes. I think a mobster in one of them. I don't know what Johnny Blaze is. Yeah. He was in Batman, the animated series, as Ubu, the voice of Ubu. He's been in a few things over the years. A lot of TV shows, a lot of voices. Wow. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, 1981 to 1983. He did the voice of Captain America, Cyclops, and Lance Macho. Well, yeah, this is a man that's been around the block. He has acted in a ton of stuff. So yeah, feel free to check him out. George DiCenzo is his name. Pretty cool actor. I liked what I saw of him in this one. He played a quite menacing guy. Briefly, There are Gene Evans, who passed away April 1st, 1998. Oh, but he's done a lot too. 157 acting credits. He is most known for My Friend Flicka, Shock Corridor, Operation Petticoat, and The Steel Helmet. The one of those Shock Corridor was 1963. Everything else was before that. So that's a lot of old movies that I don't know. He's been in 2 episodes of Murder, She Wrote. This one as Nils Highlander, and another one in 1986. He played a different character. Yeah, he's done a lot of stuff, older stuff. His most recent acting credit was 1989. So everything else he's done has been before that, which doesn't lend it to me having seen it likely. Richard Sanders. Now there is a character actor that many people will know, because he's been in a lot. He is most known for WKRP in Cincinnati. He was also in the movie Men of Honor, Valley Girl. But the WKRP in Cincinnati is the big one that I think everybody... he was Les Nessman in that one. Those of you who have seen the original WKRP in Cincinnati. Good old Les Nessman. He's been in a lot of comedy and drama shows. He usually plays a very nerdy type of a guy, because he's got that look to him. He's only in the 2 episodes of Murder, She Wrote, this one, and another one in 1986. And I think, I'm going to just briefly check here, because I think I saw something. And if that's true, that would be kind of interesting. Where is it? No, he's not that. I thought I saw him in the same episode of Murder, She Wrote in 2 years as another guy. But yeah, like Newhart, Fantasy Island, Kojak. He'd been in a lot of stuff. But good old Les Nessman. I knew I saw him from somewhere, and I'm like, where have I seen him before? But he plays Arnold Megram. Now, Arnold Megram, just to kind of round things up, Nils Highlander, Gene Evans, that particular actor, he played someone who was the head structural engineer behind the park. Arnold Megram was bookkeeper. We have... Who else was it in here? I think that's almost it. Oh, wait, no. There's a couple others. There's Philip Carlson. He is also an illusionist type of a guy. He's been in a few things. Still alive. Still making stuff. He is apparently most known for... Okay. Well, that... Alright. He's done some voice work for video games. Some of these you may have heard of. He has done the voice of HK-51 from Star Wars The Old Republic, Knights of the Fallen Empire, Shadow of Riven, and Rise of the Hutt Cartel. In those 3 video games. He's also done Lord Regent Hiram Burrows in the Dishonored video game. Avatar the Airbender, The Last Airbender, the TV series. He does the voice of the War Minister in an episode, or in a couple episodes. Yeah, he's done a lot of video game voice work over the years. HK-47 in Knights of the Old Republic. He's also does the voice of. EverQuest 2. Wow. But he's been in 4 episodes of Murder, She Wrote. One in 94, one in 89, one in 85, and then this one in 84. He was also in a few episodes of Matlock. Haha, good old Matlock. And Cluedo. There was a Cluedo TV series? Professor Peter Plum? Are you kidding me? What even is this? I don't know, but okay, I'm not gonna delve into that exactly, but yeah, we'll just I'm gonna look that up on my own time. Fucking Cluedo? I don't know. Some of you probably know. Please don't make me seem like I'm too stupid by telling me, why don't you know what Cluedo is? I thought you liked Clue. Chicago Story TV series he's been in as well. Christopher Tabori is his name, the actor's name. Mr. Carlson. So yeah, he's like the head illusionist. He kind of designs all the illusions around the park and whatnot. Those are our one more suspect. Kim Darby. That's the actress's name. She plays Laurie Bascom, who is pretty famous for a few things. Better Off Dead, the movie. True Grit, she was in as 1969. 1985, Better Off Dead. Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, 1995. She played Deborah Strode in that. Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, Sally Farnham. Wow, she's been in some stuff recently too. She was in the Perception TV series, which I really liked. I enjoyed that. The Evil Within, 2017. She was in an episode of The X-Files. She's been in stuff sporadically over the years, but still 85 credits. She played Laurie Bascom in this episode, 1984, and she wasn't in Murder, She Wrote again until 1995, when she played Joan Kemp. That'll be a while before we get to that episode, for sure. Yeah, but she's been in a few things. She is the secretary of Mr. Baldwin in this particular episode. We also get to see, who else do we get to see? Carol Donovan and Cindy Donovan. Oh, is that who I think it is? Ba 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 da da. Is she who I think it is? Arlen. I think I better go back one. Just give me a moment here. I'm checking something because I'm a little bit. Yeah. It is. Wow, that's interesting. Okay. So we meet Carol Donovan, who's played by Ann Carey, who's been in a few things. Not a lot. She was apparently only in 8 acting credits. The last one in 1986 and the first one in 1964. That's the only thing we have. An episode of Another World in 1964, Time Bomb, Lovesick, and the episode of Murder, She Wrote, where she plays Carol Donovan. This one, who is one of Jessica's nieces. She has a husband who is a detective, Police Lieutenant Burt Donovan, played by James Stevens. He has a few more acting credits, 36 to be exact. He was a voice It doesn't say what he was the voice of. In the TV series Courage the Cowardly Dog. But he was in a number of episodes of Murder, She Wrote. This one, where he played Bert Donovan, but we don't see him again as Bert Donovan. He plays different characters. He plays a different character in 1989. He plays one called Charles Strickland in 1992, and then one Charles Devon, 1994. Huh. But yeah, Diagnosis Murder, the Father Dowling Mysteries. He played Father Philip Prestwick, if you've ever seen the Father Dowling Mysteries, which also stars Tom Bosley as Father Dowling, interestingly enough. The Getaway, he was in that. He was in The Paper Chase, and he was in First Monday in October. Those are the ones he's known for. Paper Chase is a TV series, I guess. James T. Harp was the character he played in that. 58 episodes, that's a fair lot. So he's a big TV actor. Fair enough. But what had me going was the fact that the two kids of the Donovans, Billy Donovan and Cindy Donovan, are played by... Billy Donovan is played by Joaquin Phoenix, and Cindy Donovan is played by Summer Phoenix. Brother and sister. Playing brother and sister on TV. When I first saw it in my DVD case there, it was, Joaquin Phoenix was in this episode, and I'm like, what was he playing? He had to have been really young, and yeah, he just plays a kid. He was in like maybe 2 or 3 scenes. That's about it. Nothing major. The last member of this particular thing we have is Captain Davis, who is Lieutenant Bert Donovan's boss, played by John Schuck. S-C-H-U-C-K. John Schuck has been in everything. Basically everything. He was in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. He was in Curse of the Jade Scorpion. And he was in The Munsters Today as Herman Munster. He played Chief of Detectives Muldrew in 8 episodes of Law & Order Special Victims Unit. He has been in a couple episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. What else has he been in here that people might know? Babylon 5 as Drawl in 2 episodes. He's been the voice of Colonel Ralga Hobbs Gnarl Hollis, Wing Commander 3, Heart of the Tiger video game. Legate Parn in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He's been in a few Star Trek things. He was a Klingon ambassador in the Undiscovered Country. He was Herman Munster in The Munsters Today. Simon and Simon. He was in that as a few things. What else has he been in? Klingon ambassador in The Voyage Home. Saint Elsewhere, Andrew Wegner. The New Odd Couple as Murray. Turnabout. I wonder if he was in the original Munsters. Oh, scroll. I don't think so. I don't think he was in the original Munsters, but he was in the Munsters Today. Which is cool. If you've ever seen John Schuck, look up the picture of him on... if you've ever seen him in anything, you will recognize him immediately. He has a very distinctive look. All right. So we've got that done and underway. So let's take a look at the wonderful episode, and we'll go through everything that's happened here. We start off with the usual blurb about where they're showing you clips from the episode. I still don't know why they do this, or why they did it back then. It's kind of weird to me. I mean, I get it, but it's very weird why they included it on the DVD. But it goes through the whole opening sequence, and we start off with a car driving down the street. The title pops up. We're off to kill the wizard, and we see Mr. Gardner, the right hand of Baldwin, on the phone in the car, telling whoever he's talking to that he's confirmed Jessica Fletcher is indeed in town, and he will use any means necessary, flattery, cajolery, to make sure she comes. Then it cuts over to this particular little house in the suburbs, where we see Jessica and a young boy and a young girl and a mother, as Jessica is fixing a bike, and the kid is like going, "Wow, that's awesome! Dad said it couldn't be fixed." And that's young Joaquin Phoenix. So if you ever wanted to know what Joaquin Phoenix or Summer Phoenix looked like as a child, just look this episode up, because you'll see. He ends up biking off. The mother is definitely trying to get Jessica to stay a little while longer, and she's like, "No, no. Guests are like Haley's Comet," she said. "You know, good for a visit, but not seen too often." Even though the mother is like, "But we love having you here," and she's like, "Good, because that means you'll invite me back." The car pulls up, and Mr. Gardner gets out, and heaps flattery on Mrs. Fletcher, and tries to say that his employer wishes to speak with her and would like her to come, and that his employer is, of course, the horrible Horatio Baldwin. And of course, young Billy is like, "Horrible Horatio?" And is like, "One and the same, kiddo. Ha ha." You can tell he's like tolerating the kid, that he doesn't really care for it. So they get invited along to this this wonderful little thing, because Jessica's like, "I don't know if I want to," and both young Billy and Cindy are like, "Can we? Please, can we go to this amusement park? Can we please?" Which, of course, Jessica agrees. Then it jumps to Horatio's House of Horrors, this medieval castle type thing. There's this drum going on. It's a press preview by invitation only, and we see James Coco in a robe, looking like a monk, being pulled along in a cart, looking very frightened at what's going on, and he's brought along by this cart through the crowd of reporters and everything. And then they start pulling him from the cart and manhandling him up the steps of the gallows while he's crying for help. He's like, "Please, anybody." It's going to be, there's like an executioner up there and a royal announcer who decrees that he's going to be hung. And of course, his last words are for anybody to help him. And of course, there's a trumpet that sounds off from one of the parapets, as a young dashing hero is like, "I will save you," and swings on down and starts fighting with the executioner. It's quite the silly choreographed scene. Well, all the press people are looking. There's a brief struggle, and of course, the hero ends up getting pushed onto the lever, which opens up the trapdoor and drops Mr. Horatio down underneath the gallows. So everyone is immediately like, "Oh no, quick, get down there, man, get down there, we have to save him." And of course, laughter rings out from above, and there's Horatio, waving to everyone, basically saying, it was all just a prank, a good jest. Hello, everybody, welcome. Uh, it's a wonderful press release moment. Very, very staged. And of course, Jessica explains that the to the kids that it's all just a game, because they're a little bit they don't really understand. So then we see Mr. Baldwin talking to Jessica Fletcher, and leading her through the underground section of the park, where basically there's this big underground complex below the park where all of the behind the scenes stuff goes on. Very, very, very clever. Through the little hall, we see Mr. Nils Anderson come up, rather angrily talking to Mr. Baldwin. That they need to talk. There's safety issues here in the park that needs dealing with, and it's his name that's on everything. So he really thinks they need to talk. Mr. Baldwin kind of brushes him off for a bit, and continues leading Jessica through the corridor. Jessica asks him at this point, if he's invited her here to give her a job, right? Trying to, figure out why he wants to talk to her. And this alone gets me. I cannot believe I had to stop the episode and rewind it to hear this again, to make sure I didn't just hear what I thought I was going to hear. Because when Jessica asks him, "Did you just invite me here to offer me a job?" Mr. Baldwin looks at her and, kind of laughs, and he's like, "Please, Mrs. Fletcher, at least allow me the seduction before you cry rape." It blew my mind. I'm like, what? No. They did not. No. But that's exactly what he says. Now, I don't know if this was on purpose, if this was like something that was said back then. I was alive back then, but I was young, and I didn't hear that sort of thing. So I don't know if this was like commonplace in that time period or not, or if this was just if this was done on purpose to make Mr. Baldwin seem more unlikable. It's entirely possible it was done to make him seem more unlikable, because he's not a very likable man, as we shall soon find out. After those two pass, we see a door with the name Harold Megram, and good old Les Nessman ends up popping out, looking after the two that have passed by. They come into his office, and his secretary ends up telling Mr. Baldwin that there was a very important call from somebody. He, of course, tells her that he'll be the judge of what's an important call. And at that point, Jessica notices one of the books that she's written, Dirge for a Dead Dachshund. I'm not kidding, that's the name of the book. Dirge for a Dead Dachshund. So she offers to sign the book, and kind of mentions that she's trying to write a book herself. Of course, Mr. Baldwin kind of half interrupts her, and he's like, "Surely there'll be time to do that later. That can wait, like this, to sign this lady's book." And she's like, "Oh no, I don't think so." And then looks at the secretary and winks. So Jessica already is kind of pushing back against Mr. Baldwin. And she signs the book and makes the young secretary very happy. Then we see Mr. Carlson as Mr. Megram comes in to talk to him. And Mr. Carlson was working at a drafting table, doing up blueprints. Megram comes in and he says that, Jessica Fletcher's actually here, and that, he can't keep going on like this, etc., etc. Because all the stuff that he's done and over the years, and Mr. Carlson ends up telling Megram there that, from what he knows, he's going to be being made vice president, in a few days. And Megram says, yeah, he promised me I could be vice president. That was 2 years ago. He's like, he's going to do the same to you. Then it cuts to Baldwin's office. This absolutely interesting office with this big ornate desk, statuary in the background, a very gothic painting. And Horatio has apparently offered Miss Fletcher something, because the first words out of her mouth is, no, I'm not doing it. And Horatio's like, just imagine it. Horatio Baldwin presents Jessica Fletcher's House of Mystery and Murder. Of course, Jessica wants nothing to do with it, saying that, what she does is different than what he does, even though Horatio is telling her, we make our money off the same people. Jessica, of course, is drawing a line of distinction that that she writes books for people that read, whereas he peddles violence to children who don't know what's real and what's not, who haven't learned how to differentiate between fantasy and reality. So she wants no part of that. Of course, Horatio, Jessica gets up to leave, and Horatio presses a little, like a little tongue on his desk that slides a bolt closed on the door, locking her in. And he quips that he had that installed to keep people out. He's never had to use it to keep people in. They have a little bit of a tense discussion, whereby Jessica lets him know that his nephew-in-law, the husband of her niece, is a detective, and that unless he wants to be arrested for unlawful detainment, he'll open the door. He kind of says that he's never had anybody tell him no, and she compares him to one of her students who would pout and stamp his feet whenever things didn't go his way. After Jessica leaves, he picks up the phone and calls up Mr. Gardner and says that he needs him to do some research into Mrs. Fletcher. With his typical flair. The next thing we see is a security guard walking around the outside, having a cup of coffee, when a gunshot goes off. And this security guard ends up running to the office, meeting up with the second security guard. There's a light on in Mr. Baldwin's office, but there's no secretary. They try and get in the door, but it's locked from the inside, and there's no answer from inside. One of the security guards ends up asking the other, what do we do? And the first one's like, well, Mr. Carlson's here. We'll call him. So he gets on the phone, calls Mr. Carlson, and Mr. Carlson can be heard through the phone saying, after the security guard explains they heard a gunshot, and they're like, oh my God, man, get the fire axe, break the door down, do what you have to. I'll be there as soon as I can. So they go and grab the fire axe, break the door down, literally like chop a big hole in it. It's a pretty weak door, given how easy the security guard's breaking through it. And it breaks a little too cleanly. But then we see the scene that they see. Mr. Horatio slumped over his desk, revolver in his hand. Blood dripping from a wound on the side of his head. Just when he's about to check to see if he's dead, Mr. Carlson comes in the door. And then we cut to the Donovan's house late at night as Jessica's cooking some food. Good old Detective Burt there is hanging around when the phone rings, and his wife ends up saying that it's work, and young Billy ends up looking at Jessica while his father goes off to take a phone call, and he's like, "Gee, Aunt Jess, it sure would be a shame if that other burger were to go to waste." He's an adorable kid. And you end up finding out that from Bert that Horatio Baldwin's dead. And that his captain wants to talk to Jessica because apparently it's been it looks like Horatio Baldwin committed suicide. And Jessica's like, "Well, that's ridiculous. I met the man. Suicide was the last thing on his mind." And the detective, Mr. John Shuck, looking every bit the police detective in the 80s, got the mustache, got the bad suit, the even worse tie, ends up saying that he's thinking Mr. Baldwin was murdered, not suicide, even though all the evidence is pointing to suicide. Because he ends up relating what happened, that the security guards came, found the door bolted from the inside, they broke it down, found Mr. Baldwin there with a gunshot wound to his head, holding it and everything, except the medical examiner, while examining the body, found a blunt force trauma wound to the back of his head, and he believes that is what killed him and not the gunshot wound, which means it can't be suicide because a dead man can't shoot himself in the head, which is very, very interesting. But Jessica's like going, "Well, you've just proven that it has to be suicide, so how can it be murder?" So there's that wonderful little discussion as things go. And the chief kind of is hoping she has an idea as to how this could happen, because in her books, she often makes impossible murders possible. She doesn't have a clue, though. And she tells him as much. Basically, she has no clue. The next scene, we see Jessica jogging back to her niece's house, entering in, picking up the paper in the morning to see that mystery surrounds Baldwin death. Police search for missing secretary because they think the secretary might have something to do with it. She immediately goes in, picks up the phone, and schedules her flight for a little bit later in the day. And then ends up paying a visit to Horatio's House of Horrors, where a large face of Horatio, that is like animatronic, is malfunctioning. We see Mr. Carlson and Mr. Nils Anderson checking to see if it's working. Mrs. Fletcher comes along and is talking to the both of them, trying to get some information to see how they are reacting to the death of Mr. Horatio. Mr. Anderson there, the angry Swede, as Mr. Baldwin called him, doesn't seem to have any problems today. He ends up getting a phone call forwarded to a phone hidden behind a rock in the wall. That will be important later on. Um, she asked Mr. Carlson who he thinks might have wanted Mr. Baldwin dead. And he says, basically, other than, his ex-wife and the security, the popcorn vendors, the press, he basically gives a litany of suspects, which kind of makes Jessica laugh a little bit. He's a very charming sort of guy, this Mr. Carlson. But she doesn't get a lot of information. Next thing we see, a cab pulling up outside the airport, and Jessica ends up going in and getting waylaid by Mr. Gardner and a Skycap agent. Mr. Gardner ends up showing her a gun and insisting that she comes with him. Insisting with a gun. So she has no choice but to go along to a private jet, where they end up meeting, of course, Erica Baldwin, who wants to pay her $100,000 to prove that her husband was murdered. Of course, Jessica doesn't need them or want the money, even though the wife is now a 4-time widow, all of wealthy men. But apparently her husband took out a life insurance policy for $2 million about 11 months ago. And of course there's a clause in there that says that if he committed suicide, they don't have to pay. So it's in the wife's best interest that her husband was murdered. But of course Jessica is going to go and prove it anyway, because, well, the secretary is now a suspect. It is a wonderful little scene between these people, because Jessica is kind of noticing that he's pretty sure that Mr. Gardner and Miss Baldwin were sleeping together, having an affair behind the boss's back. Could be a motive. The next thing we see is the same type of cab that dropped Jessica off at the airport is dropping her off in the Baldwin house. Or not the Baldwin house, the Donovan house. Her nieces. She heads in and finds the secretary there, who immediately confesses to killing Mr. Baldwin. Of course, the scene kind of cuts to them all having coffee as she explains, well, she should have been there, so of course it's her fault that the boss is dead. But they had a big argument, which is why she wasn't there. And that Mr. Baldwin was, very, very acerbic and angry with her, and was, apparently had dirt on her, which is why he, which is why he manages to keep control over all of his people, even though everybody seems to hate him. And she's pretty sure he's got a file on everybody, all the key people there. But she's sure he went into his office alone and locked the door because she heard the bolt lock before she left. So they have to go and search that office again. And of course, Bert, Jessica's nephew-in-law, is like, we've already searched that office. And she's like, yes, but you were searching it for a door, not a cubbyhole. We see the grand opening sign coming this Friday outside the castle before it cuts to interior of the office as Bert is using a stethoscope to check the wall for a cubbyhole. Jess is sitting in Mr. Baldwin's chair, kind of looking at the ceiling, when the captain comes in and explains what they're looking for here, that they're looking for a cubbyhole with where these files are. Mr. Gardner pops his head in to have a bit of a look around as Jessica is examining the desk, perhaps looking for a switch or something. Of course, she's down behind the desk when everybody ends up looking for Jessica, and she's not there. They start toward the desk when she, like, pops her head up. And she's like, what would you say the temperature is in this room? Of course, Gardner says that it's, it's kept controlled at a 60 degrees. And there's like, well, then why would he have a thermostat installed in this? And she goes and touches the thermostat sensor and finds soot. And then immediately picks up a nearby match and lights it and holds the match near the sensor. And as soon as the temperature gets up to 100, the top of the desk slides open slightly, revealing a secret compartment underneath. But there's nothing in there. There's no files or anything. Interesting. Very interesting. So whoever killed him took the files. So Mr. Gardner goes and heads off because he has a lot of work to do. The next thing we see is down at the airport, Mr. Meacham has arrived with a flight to Mexico. The stewardess seems to recognize the name and calls for security with a button. Mr. Meacham is very squirrely and notices her looking at the security guard who's come in. And he takes off running, kind of whimpering a bit as he goes. Ends up running out the parking lot, nearly getting hit by a couple cars. Ends up tripping over one of those cement embankments, dropping his briefcase, out of which spills money. And of course, there's like 3 or 4 bystanders who like, money! And immediately runs and starts grabbing handfuls of it. Well, he's trying to get it back, going, it's my money! It's my money! It's an interesting scene. We see Mr. Meacham at the office of the detective, Bert, and Miss Fletcher's there as they talk about the money and why he was running, and end up letting him go because he's got a cat he needs to go home and tend to. Although for some reason he was flying to Mexico and didn't bring his cat. It's weird. I don't know exactly. So he goes off on his own. But we find out from the Jessica and Bert that apparently they got an anonymous tip that Meacham was running and had some information. But at the same time that the airline got a tip that he was going to be there and to search his luggage. I wonder. Somebody's setting him up. Next we see Mr. Gardner at home, and we hear a cat. And he's like, what the hell's a cat doing here? And he ends up hearing it come from out on the balcony, and is like, out on the balcony? Jesus. And out he goes, only to find there's no actual cat. It's a tape recorder of a cat that's been playing out there. And he picks it up and he's like, the hell kind of joke is this? When somebody in black grabs him and throws him over the balcony. And then picks up the tape recorder and takes it with him. Oh, we've got a murderer on our hands. Covering his tracks. What could be happening? Who could it be? Bert's getting some information then, the next day. And, of course, he doesn't think that Mr. Gardner killed himself. But there's no way to tell whether he was pushed or whether he jumped from the balcony. This was back in 1980s. We didn't have CSI who was able to determine whether someone was jumped or pushed. I don't think back then. Forensic science had not gotten that far. Of course, his wife ends up telling Bert that Jessica was at the office, so he goes and grabs the phone, looking for the number of the office to call her. One of the security guards ends up popping his head in to see Miss Fletcher. They have a little bit of a chat, and it's not long before the phone calls, and the security guard goes and picks it up, and says it's for Miss Fletcher, that she can pick up the phone in the office there because it's for her. So she goes and does so, and has a little talk with Bert, and he's like, "Oh, I'm fine, don't worry. It's not like I'm in danger or anything." Of course, she ends up noticing something and picks up the phone, opens the back of it to find a circuit board with some wires cut, or a wire cut. And that makes her think. So then she goes out and asks Ned about phoning, like if the phones are all on the same line, and if they use, which number they use, because there's like numbers going from 1998 to 2003 on the phone. And she's asking, if one calls this line, does it go, and there's already a call, it automatically goes to this line, right? And it's like, yes. And it's like, well, if you call, pick up the phone here and call this number, it should ring there, right? Yes. So she has Bert go and pick up the receiver in the other one when she calls the office in the phone. And he's like, "It's not ringing." And he's like, "Yes, just pick it up." So she picks it up, and he's like, "Okay." And he's like, "What was this all about, Jessica?" He's like, "What was this all about?" He's like, "Oh, nothing," she says. She's like, "I just figured out who killed Mr. Baldwin and how we did it. That's all." Next, we see Mr. Gardner as the security guard comes in, the same one that was just with Jessica, and gives him a note that Miss Jessica Fletcher wants to talk to him. It's important. So he calls up Jessica, and she tells him that she has figured out where those files are. That apparently Mr. Gardner kept a microfilm of this information, and that it is inside a certain attraction that isn't working right, the one with the giant head that we saw before, and that it'll take her about 30 minutes to get there. So she wants Mr. Gardner to get the blueprints for that thing, that attraction, and meet her there when she gets there. So after he hangs up the phone, we see Mr. Gardner heading right to that attraction. Opening it up and finding the microfilm inside. And pulling it out. And it's like, "Will you look at that? There's a microfilm in there. My word." So he pulls this out, and he's like, "Gotcha." And of course, Jessica calls out from across the way, standing in this little alcove, and they have a little discussion whereby she accuses him of murder, murdering Mr. Baldwin. Of course, she just stands there at the end of the hall, basically talking to him the entire time, makes no effort to get close to him or anything like that. He pulls out a gun and shoots her. Shoots Jessica Fletcher. Only he doesn't. Nope. What he does shoot is a mirror. Because it's a clever illusion. The mirror shatters, of course, revealing Jessica wasn't there. And then you hear the voice behind him telling him to put his hands up as good old Detective Burt and another couple policemen have guns on him. So they arrest him. Of course, she thanks Mr. Nils Anderson for helping set up the illusion. Of course, she also tells Mr. Gardner, or not Mr. Gardner, what's his name, Mr. Carlson, that the microfilm was actually just pictures from her vacation. Lastly, we see everyone involved, except for, of course, Mr. Carlson, in the office as Detective Burt ends up explaining how it was all done. That our bad guy, Mr. Carlson, ended up having an argument with Mr. Baldwin in his office. They struggled, and Mr. Baldwin ended up hitting his head, basically killing himself. Carlson pushed him, and he hit his head and was dead. And of course, he knew blame would go on him, so he ended up immediately going back to his office, getting the gun that he had there, forwarding calls to his office into Baldwin's office, and ensuring that the light on the secretary's phone wouldn't show up. Went in, locked the door, cut the cable on the phone so the phone in Baldwin's office wouldn't ring, and staging the suicide by putting the gun in his hand and putting it to his temple and pulling the trigger, causing the gunshot sound. Of course, the security guards ended up going in, trying the door, and calling Mr. Carlson. The call was forwarded to the office, but because he dismantled the ringer, it didn't ring. So he picked up the phone and told him, break the door down. And then hung up the phone. And because he was dressed all in black, he ended up pulling up the hood of his turtleneck to cover most of his face and hid in the dark shadows. So when the guards broke the door down and came in, they were focused on the body. So Mr. Carlson slipped out behind them, out into the hallway, pulled off the turtleneck and hid it somewhere, and then immediately came in and called out. So it looked like he just walked in the door. And thus, his illusion was complete. Quite clever, actually. I have to admit, that was a clever little murder. Next thing we see is the secretary and Bert seeing Miss Fletcher off at the airport. Miss Fletcher tells the secretary that wonderful young lady, Lori Bascom, to write her book. And she's like, oh, no, I have the real world. So she goes and pulls out a check, the same check that Miss Baldwin wrote for $100,000. And she's like, you can have it. I've already authorized it to you. So take the money and go write that book. And send me a first edition copy when it gets published. Then her plane is called, so she heads off. Just giving away $100,000. That's Jessica Fletcher. That's what she does. She's okay with doing that. She's got tons of books. She's got a book called Dirge for a Dead Dachshund. I mean, what do you expect? Of course, she doesn't. She doesn't tell the secretary that it's $100,000 check. Just that it's a check that was written out to her. So it isn't until she's about to head out to the gate that the secretary looks at the check and is like, "Oh my god!" So yeah, definitely an interesting little episode. I quite enjoyed it, as always. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode of the Murder She Wrote Rewatch podcast. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please give that like button a tap. Give that subscribe button a tap as well, if you haven't already, so you can be kept apprised of when I do new videos. And throw a comment in the comment section. What did you think of this particular episode of the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast? What did you think of, that particular phrase that Mr. Baldwin used that I still can't believe they did that. It was, buh? It's one of those things. I suspect that is one of the prime examples of it was a different time. So yeah, that's it. As always, thank you all so much for watching. All that good stuff. Stay tuned because in another couple weeks we'll be back with the next episode of the Murder, She Wrote Rewatch podcast. So you all take care and join me next time for more murder.